All right, let's get into this bad boy. It's going to be a fun one. Bundle. Welcome to the library, everybody. As you guys know, when I'm coming to you from here, typically we're talking about something Robert E. Howard related, and today is no exception to that rule. Today we're doing a Robert E. Howard Battle Royale. Not just any Battle Royale. It's a Battle Royale of the first published Conan story. That's right, you saw the thumbnail. We're covering the Phoenix on the Sword today. So here in Battle Royale number 18, we are going to be talking about that work. As you guys know, what we do in this channel is we compare and contrast the comic versions. What are we talking about today? Conan the Barbarian Annual number 2 from all the way back in 1976. And then we're going to be comparing that with the Dark Horse version of King Conan, the Phoenix on the Sword, which is a 4-part miniseries that they put out, I'm going to say, 2012-ish? Don't hold me to it, but I'm going to assume it's from somewhere around there. These were kind of weird. I got to tell you, both of them stuck to the story, but both of them went and did a little bit of meandering here. So I'm actually somewhat curious as to what the conclusion time is going to draw on this one. As you guys know, when I shoot these conclusions, I do them in one take. I come out to you guys and I say, well, this is what I saw, and then I sort of think my way through it. Some of you might just want to skip right on to that if you want to skip the actual content because you don't want the spoilers. So there's my spoiler warning right now. As you know, I put chapters in these videos, so feel free to tick on through to the end. But I am throwing in one special spoiler here. As you know, we're covering a Dark Horse Conan comic from the 2000s here. 2000s, 2010s. Yeah, you guys who know. If you got youngins in the room, you got to say to yourself, Tennessee Fats is what you're going to talk about and show me here is safe for the youngins. If you have to ask that question, it ain't safe for the youngins. So just skip right on past that Dark Horse chapter, okay? We'll see you in the conclusion. All right, without any more looking at me, let's get into the books. Let's talk about the book itself. What did Robert E. Howard actually do here? Well, I'll tell you, this is an interesting one, and it's, quite frankly, put the topic of a fair amount of stuff on the interwebs. Get yourself on the interweb. Get yourself over there on the old interweb machine and do a little bit of this. You know, that. Do a little bit of that and search this whole thing up. Find out for yourself what happened here. But it's interesting that this is a rewrite of an old story. The story of By This Axe I Rule. And I'm not saying he took it from somebody else. He took it from himself. He literally took a story that wasn't selling, sexified it up, spat it on out, and boom, you get the first King Conan story. Pretty cool, but the problem is the waters get a little muddied. Yeah, they do. When you read this, if you've already read By This Axe I Rule, which I have, and if you've read the comic adaptations of By This Axe I Rule, which I have, you're sitting there going, who are these guys again? Why did and elements of that other story come in? And then you're sitting there going, well, why didn't that happen here? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because a big component of that By This Axe I Rule story didn't make it into the Conan story at all. It's a material shift in a big piece of the subplot. But I don't want to spoil By This Axe I Rule for you. That's not what we're talking about today. We'll do another Battle Royale on that later on, I'm sure. But for now, let's stick with this one, okay? So, what happens in this story? Well, it's a pretty cool story. The story effectively is one wherein King Conan survives an assassination attempt. Yeah, he survives that. That's effectively the story. Is that it? Yeah, that's pretty much it. But what happens in here is some real kick-ass characters come wandering through the stage. Let's talk about the dramatis persona here, shall we? Let's just walk through who's involved in it. We'll talk about the big one here. And this is the big moneymaker right here. I'm going to start putting post-it notes up. First one, Thoth-Amon, all right? We know Thoth-Amon. Everybody knows Thoth-Amon. This is the guy. This is the guy Robert E. Howard wrote into this story and put a lot of detail in, which is why when you're looking at a lot of Conan villains that do go through the Robert E. Howard mythos, this one sticks. You see him a lot in the comics. You see him a lot basically in the stories. We just went through that whole Book of Thoth thing, and we did a review on that 2 weeks ago. It's in fact right over there. We did that, and I gotta tell you, yeah, staying power. He's in here. We're gonna get to how he's in here in a second. Let's talk about this guy though first. Ascalante. Yeah, that guy. Ascalante, and the story opens basically in Ascalante's lair as 4 people go meandering out into the night. It's dark, it's cloaked, it's an evil time of day. The mythos is negative. It's a mysterious place that he's in. And these guys are heading out. And there's a cloaked figure at the door. It basically mouths off at them and says, ha, you're leading yourselves to your doom, you suckers. And you don't really know why. And then Ascalante and this other individual, who, the heckler, sit down to chat. And when in this, you get a real sense of who these other 4 characters are. Ascalante basically Cole's notes, is somebody's been brought in, a disgraced noble from Aquilonia has been brought back from the desert where he's been acting as a raider to partake in the assassination of King Conan. And he's been brought in to do this because there's a certain number of people that don't like King Conan's rule. Not only are the people a little bit fickle, but the actual barony are not too pleased with King Conan being there because, well, he shook up the social order. Things have changed. And here's where we get our main people here. You got Dion here. Dion, I wrote this down. Dion, who's a baron. Okay, he's a baron. He's a dude. He's there. He's got issues. He doesn't like it. Conan's taken away basically his estates. He's been worked down to basically nothing. But he has royal blood in him. Royal blood that belongs to the prior line, prior to Conan killing that old king and taking the crown off his head and making himself king. Okay, so Dion's got some royal blood. He wants the crown. He's going to be a conspirator. Who else you got? You got Volmana. Volmana's a count, also within Aquilonia. Slightly disgraced. Slightly? A lot of disgrace. Let's go with that, okay? But he's got cash. Doesn't like the fact that, quite frankly, his cash resources are dwindling under Conan's rule. Wants it back. Why? He was in tight with the former guy. He'd want Conan out. Makes sense. You got Grommel. Grommel is the head of basically the army. Not the king's own guard, but the army itself. And quite frankly he's had royal rule and the actual lead and the captaincy of the army diminished under King Conan's rule. And he doesn't like the other guy that actually was responsible for the Black Dragons, which is Conan's royal group that he works with. This is his own private elite team. He wants that all back. He doesn't like Conan. Makes sense. Okay. And the last one, this is the crazy guy in there. This one doesn't make a lot of sense. Ronaldo. He's a poet. And for those of you who know, and you've read a lot of King Kull, well, trust me, you know who Ronaldo is. He's the poet. He's the bard. He's running around. But guess what? Poets are fickle. They be fickle people, but they turn the people with their magical words. And they've decided that they're going to turn the actual people against Conan. Ascalante has arranged this whole thing by using these four for the skills that they have. And he explains to Thoth-Amon, who is his slave at this point in time, here's what we're doing. These guys are going to go out there and they're going to take this whole kingship from themselves. And that's going to happen. That's going to be fun. Then I'm going to murder them all and I'm going to take it over for myself. And Thoth-Amon's like, whoa, that's pretty crazy, but pretty damn smart. I like where you're going with this. Thumbs up to you. They think you're the tool and you're actually making them the tool. So what does Ascalante do? He does a bunch of things. He uses Ronaldo to inflame the people. He's inflamed the people to the point where they've actually made a statue of the former king in the temple of Mitra. And they worship him, and they're doing sacrifices to him. Conan even makes the comment when he's lamenting this, and he's like, these idiots. These are the same people who had their wives and daughters thrown into the prior king's seraglio. These are the guys who had their brothers and cousins killed and tortured. And they're sitting here burning incense for the prior king because this Ronaldo guy has fired them up against me because I'm an outsider. This is nuts. Well, that's the kind of power that actually, the media has. Think about that. The media. What does it have? That's it right there. Power. That's right. What's the other thing he's done? What's he done? He's used Dion. What's he used Dion for? Well, Dion's got cash. So what he's done is he's used Dion and his cash to smuggle a whole bunch of booze into the pits, which are on the border, to enrage them, get them all fired up. Just so they'll come and they'll attack. So they're attacking Aquilonia and attacking the media. Okay, that's pretty bad. So you got to send out soldiers to fight this off. So you're depleting a bunch of the soldiers that are in the capital where King Conan is. Okay. Who are you going to send out? Well, I'll tell you what you do. You take your leader of the army here, and you make sure that he's sending out the loyal guys, and the guys who are loyal to him particularly, they're staying in town. Yeah, you're starting to pick up what I'm laying down now, aren't you? How do you get the last of these guys out? How do you get the actual lieutenants? The guys who are loyal that this guy has no control over it. I'll tell you how you do it. You take a guy like this, little man who's a count. He's got all sorts of ins and outs. He's gone over to the king of Numidia, and we know who the king of Numidia is. We run into him much later. Yeah, try the Hour of the Dragon. Yeah, you'll see what I'm talking about. And he's turned around and said, hey, listen, I need your help fighting off these Picts. Why don't you send what's remaining of your army and all of your lieutenants over to help me out on this? And Conan's like, legit request. Yeah, the public's going to appreciate that. Let's do that. And this is the whole scheme that Ascalante has set up here, just in order that Conan might be left alone, so that Grommel can get the one guy that actually leads off the actual king's guard to walk away from his door at midnight that night. This whole story happens in one night. Thoth-Amon is sitting here listening to the story saying, it's pretty darn smart. I like everything about that. But, you put too much faith in your whole espionage and what have you, because, magic is much more powerful. And if I wasn't your slave and you didn't have my ring of power, well, by God, you'd be my slave. And things don't go well. Thoth-Amon and Ascalante have it out. And Ascalante, at the end of the day, just in the face and says, "Get out of here." And so, you know what? I need you to go to watch this Dion guy, because you know what? He's entirely too cowardly. So you get out there and find out what's going on with him. Thoth-Amon sort of begrudgingly says, "Fine, I'll go do that." Rides off after Dion, and away it goes. Now, at this point in time, you have things that happen parallel to one another. We have one scene that happens where you have Conan, and he's talking to one of his lieutenants, and he's saying, why do you get to go off and fight? Why do I got to stay here just because my stupid advisor says I got to be here for political crap? This sucks. I wanted the crown, but I never thought I'd pass that. I got to run this crappy country. And he's like, "Well, listen, you took the crown, so stick it." And Conan's like, "Yeah, okay, fine. I'll just shut up and I'll do it." He says, "What are you working on?" And this is an actual key point within the story. And I really like the way they did this, because Conan, who supposedly doesn't like writing, is sitting here working on a map. And what he's doing is he's actually adding to the maps of the court, and he's showing these are the northern kingdoms. Here's Samaria, here's Asgard, here's Vanheim, here's Hyperborea. And his first lieutenant's like, "These things are mythical. These places don't exist." And Conan's like, "They totally exist. You wouldn't say that if you were part of the border raids that I was as a kid. Trust me, they're there." And this is done really in a way to show how much of an outsider Conan is within this society, which I thought was really well done by Robert E. Howard. He really wanted to show this is why Conan doesn't fit. And this is also one of the things that makes him best for the job. He's got outside knowledge. He's able and capable of running this country. And it's because he knows these things that the rest of these people that are insulated don't know. It gives them the perspective to really run it. It's one of these watershed moments in the story where makes sense. I totally get it. I do totally get it. Anyways, these two lament about it, and he says, "Well, I'm going to go off, I'm going to drink his wine. I'll drink a cup of wine for you." And Conan's like, "Yeah, go ahead and do that. But whatever you do when you're kissing his dancing women, don't do that for me, because that'll involve a whole war, and we don't need that." And they both sort of chuckle, "Oh," and off he goes, and he does his thing. The other thing that happens at this point in time, though, and this is the other piece of the story that keeps it in motion, this is what really develops this character of Thoth-Amon. Yeah, he's there, and he's in this garden with Dion, who's, quite frankly put, just spoiled. He's sitting there, I believe the phrase was that he was rubbing a golden meshed necklace nervously as he's sitting in his garden, and Thoth-Amon is watching him, and he's like, "Dude, you got to relax. This whole plan is perfect. Nothing bad could happen. This has been really well laid out." And Dion's like, No. This Ascalante is just another guy. He could fail just like anybody else. And if it does, we're screwed." This is where Thoth-Amon, thinking ahead, and this really shows the development of the character, comes out and says, "Well, I'll tell you what, Dion. Here's the deal. Here's what's actually going to happen here. Ascalante's going to kill all of you. You're going to go ahead and take power, and then he's going to murder every single one of you. Here's my story. Here's what happened to me." And he explains how he was this powerful wizard south in Stygia, and how he had lost his ring of power, and that he was escaping because there are so many people that were priests that were jealous of him, that were, quite frankly, persecuted because when he was in power, he was so evil that they went after him, and he had to escape in a caravan, and he disguised himself as a camel driver just in order to get away. When Ascalante raided that caravan, he slaughtered everybody, and Thoth-Amon was the only survivor because he said, whoa, "I'm Thoth-Amon, not a camel driver. You don't want to kill me. Here's what I can do." Ascalante recognizes that and says, "This is a little resource. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use you, slave." Thoth-Amon has this whole conversation with Dion, explains this. But this is the character flaw within Dion. Dion wasn't listening. Dion's staring off into space, daydreaming. And the only thing he picks up out of this whole thing was that this guy mentions that he lost a ring. And he goes, "Wait a minute. I bought a ring from somebody the other day. Yeah, he was a thief. He said he stole it from some wizard down in the south, and it's really powerful. It's my good luck token." And he reaches into this secret compartment within his, what do they call it? His marble couch. And he pulls out a whole bunch of trinkets, and included is this ring. Thoth-Amon loses his poop. "My ring!" Brain explodes. He has a dagger out, stabs Dion literally in the chest, kills him on the spot, and probably without even being aware of what he's doing. Grabs the ring, puts it on, and it's almost like one of those, it really was what I would picture would happen with Bilbo Baggins if he ever got back together with the ring. It's just one of these things where he's like, whoa, he's absorbed in the ring. He drops. He doesn't even realize how long he's mumbling over the ring as he's drawing in all of its evil power. But he ain't stupid. Dion's dead, but he ain't useless. He grabs some of the blood out, starts rubbing it on the ring, and starts mumbling incantations. He's like, Oh, Ascalante, it's on. Summons up creatures from the nether region. He's summoning, and he doesn't even look at what he's drawing in, and he's summoning in because he knows it's so evil. At the end of the day, something that's described as basically an ape with wings appears. And he pulls out a sandal of Ascalante because he's always been planning this, the murder of Ascalante. He holds it up to him and he says, listen, buddy, you get out there and you find the owner of this and you murder the crap out of him. And you look him dead in the eyes and you burn his soul before your jaws rip into his throat. And he says, oh, by the way, kill everybody else with him. And off he goes. And that is basically where our whole interaction with Thoth-Amon ends. Really interesting that you have this character that you've drawn in, you've developed up to this point. You've really made him this powerhouse within the story. And he was there to facilitate a major plot event within the story. But then, gone. He disappears. Another one of those Robert E. Howard perfect onions that he throws into a story where you know there's layers underneath it. You know there's more to it. And it's enough to draw you in. But he doesn't go any further. Anyways, that has happened to the side. Conan in bed that night, sleeping. Here's something that happened while this was all occurring, while Conan was sleeping though. He gets a call. Not a call like you and I get a call. We're like, yeah, Tennessee Fats. No, not like that. He's sleeping and he starts to hear his name being called out. Somebody's chanting for him. He finds himself wandering in this dreamscape into basically a temple where it's described wonderfully. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details on this because quite frankly put, I'll never do it the justice it deserves. It's a beautiful description. It's a beautiful depiction of a mountain, of a tomb. And within this tomb that he finds after he's walked up stairs that have a carved head of Set on each step, that he finds an old man. I'm not going to talk about the old man too much here. Needless to say, this old man is literally the original guy that fought Set back in the day, down to being the nothing that he is by the time King Conan is in power and Robert E. Howard is writing this story. Set is a nada. He's a nothing. Especially with the Ring of Power gone and Thoth-Amon basically being enslaved. There's nothing left for him to do. This guy, however, has been watching all of this. He hates Set. And even in his own demise, even though it existed 1,500 years ago, he's still watching all the worshippers of Set and all the people who are Set's machinations, people who are being manipulated by him. And in this one, he says to Conan, listen, here's the deal. You know who I am because, I've been dead for 1,500 years and you've heard my name. That's cool. There's no problem with that. But something's happened outside of this whole thing. He says, yeah, you're in danger and you can fight off people. That's fine. But something bad has happened outside of all these people with swords. And you need my help. And Conan's like, all right, but you only help the legitimate rulers of Aquilonia. Like that, you only come back in myth every once in a while to do this. Why are you helping me? And he's very clear. He says, no. Aquilonia's faith and its fate is tied to your faith and fate. And although you don't believe in Mitra, by God, he believes in you. And you got to understand, the whole country can only exist through you. And I've marked you for greatness. So here's what we're going to do. Give me your sword. And he holds out his sword. And he's like, that's probably a trick or something. He holds it out anyways. And this guy carves a little phoenix on it. Hence the phoenix on the sword. See where we're going there? Anyways. And he says, that's great. Glad I helped you. Get the hell back out of here. Kicks him out. And Conan wakes up and he's in his room. And he's like, the hell just happened? Pulls up, holy crap, look at my sword, it's got a phoenix on it. That was real. That's pretty scary. Okay. Anyways, let's get back to the actual happening of now. The actual things that are going on. The now. Not the now that was then, the now that's now. Guess what? Guards have gone. They've left. Conan is awake. He's got a sword. He's looking at it going, that's weird. But this is where the Barbarian kicks in. He hears feets, little feetses out there scurrying about. Not rodent feetses, people feetses. And he's like, ooh, time to don some armor. He starts putting on his armor. While he's doing that, Dinglenuts over here, Grommel, breaks through the door with Ascalante, Volmana, and Ronaldo. Why are they over there? Well, they're going to myrtleize him. They open the door expecting to find him fast asleep. And what's he doing? He's standing in the middle of the room, half in armor. Didn't have time to put a helmet on, but he's half in armor. Hasn't done up the sides. And he's got a sword. And he ain't taking no crap. And they come at him because they're in the door and they see him just an angry barbarian, completely ready to rock and roll. And they're like, oh, and they stop. And Ascalante says, no, idiots. You gotta go. We gotta go. So they attack. Listen, it's a long battle. All you need to know is that everybody over here, they dead. They dead. They don't make it. They're gone. Conan and they gone. Okay, you don't mess with King Conan. But Ascalante and a couple of his flunkies are still alive. What happens at this point in time? Because bear in mind, Conan has been injured in the battle. He's not doing great, but he is still doing all right. Ascalante's still there with some flunkies. There were like 18 of them described in the story. So the fact that he's gotten them down to this number, pretty damn impressive. This is when the machinations of Thoth-Amon come kicking in. Ape Thing appears in the hallway behind the guys who are guarding the door so Conan can't get out. And it just starts. And it's incredibly quick. It's incredibly bad. Everybody dies. That's all you need to know. Ascalante gets the look, and you get a beautiful description of his soul being burned at the time, just before the teeth sink in, and he's gone. Conan looks at this because I guess all that's left in the room is Conan at this point in time, and this giant winged ape monster. And it's coming at him. He throws the axe that he's wielding. It glances off the thing's skull. It bites into his arm. He's thinking, okay, I'm going to die. It's staring him in the eyes, doing the same thing, doing that soul-burning routine. And just because he's got that savage barbarianism, and he pulls himself, jerks himself back at the last second to reach over and find the hilt of his sword that broke during the battle and stabs the thing. And when he stabs it, it reels back and it drops. It drops on the spot. One stab and it's gone. So maybe that whole Phoenix thing worked out. Maybe. At this point in time, a whole bunch of folks show up. There's a whole lot of yelling. They're stitching Conan up. Conan mentions, meeting this scribe or this ancient guy, and everybody says, whoa, 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 you can't talk about that. He's like, listen, am I a slave to you? I'm the king, sucker. And like, whoa, no offense. No, it's all good. Don't slaughter me. And he explains, no, this is what happened to me. And there was a monster over there, and I'm not delirious. There was a monster. Although it's melted now, there was a monster. Like, you gotta believe me. And the guy says, well, hold on. Let me see this sword that you're talking about here. And this is the chief guy, this chief politician guy. And he looks at it and he goes, holy crap. And he's stunned. And he goes, he was totally visited by him. Everybody, look at this. This is incredible. Look over there on the floor. And looking on the floor, what do they see? They see the burn and the stain mark on the floor where this thing is melted away. And it's never washed off after that. But Conan's legitimacy of the king is now sealed. Very cool story and a very cool wrap-up. You saw so much development of Thoth-Amon in this that really I was wishing as a reader that you would see it continue on through. Bear in mind, in the original By This Axe I Rule, it certainly wasn't Thoth-Amon. Not talking further about that now. But really you had this wonderful development that honestly made me appreciate what was done with the Book of Thoth that Marvel put out years later. They really held to it, even to the point where they got the mummery of blinding the snake, which he blinded his eyes in the story. That's an incredible detail, and it really makes me appreciate that much more. Other real development in here was this Ronaldo guy. Ronaldo being this mad bard. Like, you really got a sense, even though it's just purposely skipped over, of what his actual role in this is. He's nuts. Nutso. But the last piece in here was the real development of this brooding king, where you start off with the story of him brooding and angry. I can't go out. I haven't had a horse between my legs in ages, and I gotta go slaughter something. This is ridiculous. Why am I stuck here with a stupid quill? He's not happy. But to get this slaughter fest in his bedroom after this adventure with this thing on the axe, not the axe, the sword, the phoenix, and being visited by a guy that basically proves his legitimacy. And it's my opinion that was included to really quell the masses. If you read beyond the end of the story, if you think beyond that, really what would happen there is news of this conversation between this crazy old guy that used to kill Set and Conan in his dreams, and the fact that he was actually supported by him, would probably make the people shut the hell up. Just my 2 cents. Beautiful story. Really enjoyed this one. And once you were able to actually draw out the By This Axe I Rule contents and just set it aside and really just focus on this, you really appreciate this for what it is. All right. That was a real long workaround with Post-it notes. Let's get into the actual books now. All right, let's get into this. We'll start off with the actual Marvel version on this one. I know I was tempted to go into the Dark Horse one first, but I think we'll do this one. This is an odd one, I tell you. This is the actual book. This is the king-sized annual, Conan the Barbarian #2 from 1976. And I'll tell you, this has not been reprinted that much. I was actually surprised when you think about it. This is the first appearance of Thoth-Amon in comics, and I would have thought this would have been reprinted more. But when I looked into it, I could only find 2 other reprints. One was in a omnibus that I don't own, and I think the other one was in an Epic collection that I also don't own. And I wasn't about to go out and buy them just for that, because I actually do own this. I bought the entire Conan run, so I'm good. So let's pop this bad boy open. You know, the good part about doing this video is it gives me a chance to actually rebag this one, because this is actually an older Mylite bag that I bought from one supplier that I really didn't like. You'll see, you see the ripples? Can you actually see the ripples? Do I have to angle it a bit? So there, you'll see the ripples in that? Yeah, a good Mylite should not do that. So, or a good bag, even if it's an OPP, shouldn't do that. I think that actually is an OPP, not a Mylite. This book there. But yeah, we'll rebag that one. So here's the actual comic. We're going to go through this one today because, well, why not? This is the copy I have, and it's the one we're going to use without me spending a butt ton of money just to get another one. So, this story, introducing the sinister sorcery of the man called Thoth-Amon. Pretty cool, and it's all included in one story right here. And it is a shorter story, so in theory, Marvel should be able to do it. Let's kick into it. Now, one of the things you're going to notice, and I noticed this when I was reading this, is that you see the tanning on the pages. Just bear in mind, I wanted to point that out because I thought this was a fascinating thing for the copy that I have. Note the tanning now. And then skip a little bit forward in the video, or skip a little bit back in the video when you're at that point, and note the color of the pages when we get to the back of the book. It's a weird thing. Anyway, the story starts off with a prologue by Roy Thomas and John Buscema, where it's basically talking about Conan and the adventures that he had, and what brought him to the point where he ended up being the king and how he ended up becoming the king of Aquilonia. Because obviously you want the reader to understand this is later in his life. It's funny because it's a square bound. It's hard to do this without actually hurting the book, but there's Bellet right there. I believe this is the Tower of the Elephant we're looking at up here. Interesting little vignettes that walk through the adventures that he's had. And that's what really brings us into the story at hand. It actually is the phoenix on the sword. The story starts off with, as I mentioned, and we did a quick little synopsis, the four of them leaving into the darkness and basically being heckled, but openly heckled at this point in time. He's being somewhat loud in how he's saying it. And this is, of course, what we're supposed to read into is Thoth-Amon. Here's the characters leaving, and you have the conversation that occurs between Thoth-Amon and Ascalante here, where Thoth-Amon is clearly Stygian. He's described in great detail here, and he doesn't even look the same as what we see him later in comics. So it's interesting how they imaged him here versus how they image him later. A real difference. I mean, if you look at this face, like this does not look anything like the Thoth-Amon that I would have expected. But anyways, moot point. He's talking about Ascalante, and he's explaining, you know, these people are going to serve their purpose, and these are the Rebel Four. And basically, this summarizes the conversation that we talked about. Talks about how these are the four of them, and it gives a little bit of information about them, and how he's basically manipulated the situation such that Aquilonia is really on the verge of war. This soldiery has been drawn out to fight off the Picts, also to go over and help nearby Numidia, and at the same time he's talking about his plan, wherein Grommel will lead them away and Conan the Barbarian will die that night. Conan the king of Aquilonia, because he's got dreams for himself to take it over. He's talking about how he's going to do it. It's quite the thing, really. And this is where you have the setup where you have the fight. And I'm not going to go through these word by word here, because what I want to point out is this one does a really good job. Marvel is, if you were looking through the dialogue here, the dialogue at the front of this story does an excellent job of talking to exactly what Robert E. Howard wrote. This whole conversation, bang on. The violence, the smack, bang on. Go keep an eye on Dion, bang on. It's really well done. And then you get the cutscene. And the cutscene is where Conan is having a conversation. He's working on a map and he's complaining. And he's like, you know, exactly as I told you happened in the Robert E. Howard story. He's complaining about the fact that he wants to go out and go on adventures. He doesn't want to hang around here. And it sucks. And really, he has this conversation at the end of it. Remember I talked about how he's like, okay, well, you know, when you're kissing the girls, make sure you don't do that for me because that'll start a war. This doesn't turn into a laugh. If you look at this face, this is not a laughing face. I think they may have missed the point there. Granted, we're going to stop there. I think that's the only thing where they're really off, because here's Conan working on the map. They have the conversation where they talk about how Conan really is that outsider we chatted about earlier. You see it. And then we get to the actual debacle where you Thoth-Amon and Dion. Yeah, he goes right at it. And this just perfectly depicts Dion as just being this bumbling guy who's not paying attention. Ring? Oh, a ring, did you say? Completely not listening to anything that's happened. And he dies just because of his own ability to listen. Boom, he is dead. Thoth-Amon grabs the ring. And this is that point where I'm talking about where he said he was just absorbing the evil within the ring. It was beautifully done. And he actually cuts to drawing in the monster. Now this monster looks a little different. And this one's kind of weird. And this is where things start to go a little sideways. There was a little nuance that occurred here, but I can understand what happened. I'm going to go back and I'm going to show it to you first. Remember I mentioned that he specifically rubbed Dion's blood on the ring. Pardon me. He specifically rubs it on there because he's really empowering the ring. He doesn't do it here. I'm thinking this is a Comics Code thing. Hold on, let's just go back over here. Yep, Comics Code Authority. Perhaps that's not there because of oversight. I don't know, but we'll give it to him for that reason and say maybe that's why it's not there. Anyways, he brings in the monster. I don't know about you guys. This looks more like a baboon than an ape to me. And I don't see any rings. Or wings. I'm not seeing it here. Anyways, he does what he's supposed to do, though. He says, here's a sandal, go get the thing, kill him. Fine. These are minor nuanced changes. No blood on the ring. The monster doesn't really look like the monster in the story as described. Whatever, I'll move on. Cut scene to Conan having the dream sequence. And lo and behold, here he is. He's wandering along. He's drawn out of his dream. He's walking up the stairs with the heads that look like Set. And he runs into him. Oh, hold on. Advert. And here's Epimetheus. Oh yeah, this is me. I fought him and this is what I do. But things are happening beyond our control. And give me your sword. Beep, beep, beep. And then he wakes up. And Conan is back in his bedroom. And he's like, what the hell just happened? And lo and behold, there is that little thing, that little emblem of a phoenix on the sword. Title time. But he's not just sitting there looking at the phoenix on the sword. He's thinking, wait a minute. I am alert. I hear footprints. I am alert as a wolf at bay. And away we go. You know what's going to happen next. Well, here's the guards being led away. And this is actually a really good depiction here. I wanted to point this out. In the story, when Conan's guards are leaving him or abandoning their post, they're being led away by their captain. And the captain is only doing this because he's actually been blackmailed into it because he's amassed in gambling debts. And he needs to do this to pay it off. But note he's covered in sweat here. When these guys are watching the troops go by, as they're hiding in shadows here, they note that he's covered in sweat. He's incredibly nervous about what he's doing. And these troops are glaring at him for leading them away from the king's door. This is an interesting thing, because that was a very small detail, but Marvel's taken the time to include this here. Good context setting. I like what they've done there. And then the battle. Now, we're not going to go through the battle in detail here. I'm going to point out a couple key things here that were a little bit off, okay? Rommel does knock the door open, no problem. Conan has a belt, boots, and little bracers on his wrist. That doesn't quite look like an armored barbarian to me. Not quite the armor level that he was supposed to be at. That's a little off. But you know what? The battle does occur. Now, what's interesting in this battle is there's a lot of dialogue going back and forth. The sword does break right off the bat on Grommel's head immediately. That does happen in the story. No problem. That happens. But what happens throughout this, though, is that Conan is recognizing the people that he's fighting. He recognizes them as they're coming in the room. Which is interesting because in the actual written story, a key point was that Conan had no idea who these people were that he was fighting. He only really recognized them in the moment of slaughtering them. Like, yes, oh, that's Grommel. When I bashed his head. Ronaldo, oh, don't attack me because, this is pretty crappy. I'm going to have to kill you. That happens a little bit later. But again, when you're talking about that count, well, again, he doesn't recognize them until the moment of death. But in here, they have a whole lot of conversation where he's talking to them. And Ascalante, he recognizes Ascalante, whereas he doesn't even know who Ascalante is in the Robert E. Howard story because that was before his time. Really odd. And of course, here we've got Ronaldo doing his attack. Conan doesn't want to kill him because he does believe that actually the media is kind of a good thing. He's smart enough to know that. He's smart enough to know that killing this guy would be wrong because it's going to make him a martyr. And it's only when he does cut him that he does turn around and say, okay, well, I'm going to have to murder you, which comes right there, by the way, because he's trying to fight him back. Anyways, he does manage to fight them all off until he's at the point where he's at the wall, and this is where Marvel goes a little off base. And this is where things get really confusing. You remember how at the beginning of this, I told you how this was a rewrite of an original Kull story? I don't know what they were going for here. Suddenly, the guys who are looking at Conan as he's standing against the wall and he's wounded, they no longer picture Conan there. They're picturing Kull of Atlantis, Kull the Destroyer, because they're saying that history is repeating itself. And they go through all these analogies and there's all this writing about how they're seeing this. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Robert E. Howard didn't write any of that in. No, he didn't write any of that in at all. It was just, I think this was Marvel's way of trying to reconcile the fact that they had already written the story in a Kull story, but they recognized that this was a redo. And maybe they were trying to say, oh no, this is just history repeating itself later. It's just a coinkydink. And you're like, I don't know. Anyways, Battle ensues, and we're not going to go through the details until, guess who appears behind them? And he turns around to see, and this is actually very well done, because he doesn't actually turn to see, the beast has appeared. These are the people at the door. They're not doing well. Beast is coming in and killing everything in sight. And he doesn't turn around because he's busy being about to kill Conan, and he's attacked from behind when he feels the claws sinking into him. And you see here it looking in his eyes and the look on his face before it breaks his neck. It breaks his neck here. It doesn't bite his neck out. Or you could argue that it's actually ripping his throat out with his claws, but it's not fangs. Kind of weird. And then it looks at Conan being the last guy in the room. Conan's like, oh, this isn't going to go well. Throws the thing. Well, it doesn't throw the thing. Hits him in the skull. It bounces off his skull. Bingo, right there. And knocks him aside and bites into his bracer on his arm. Wrist, more correctly, not his arm. And Conan doesn't really get this whole glaring attack that we saw earlier until he reaches for the sword. And even then, when he stabs it, he ends up stabbing it, and it dies, don't get me wrong, but there isn't really that glaring attack thing, which is kind of strange. Remember I mentioned the color of the pages? Anyone want to do a flippity-flip backwards and forwards and see how the back here is a little bit lighter? So cool. Anyways, paper aging, it's a weird thing. Anyways, everybody else arrives. They have the conversation with him. Conan has this whole wrap-up where he says, I'm not crazy. Yes, I met that guy. Yes, this is what happened. And they're like, dude, you can't talk about this. Like, shut up. I'm going to talk about it. And there's the thing, the phoenix on the sword. Everybody goes, oh, he did see it. And then cut scene to the mark on the floor. That's a stain that's permanently there. And then they talk about the fact that, this isn't the last time he sees Thoth-Amon. It happens later. Again, a reference to Kull. I'm not seeing it. I'm really not seeing it at all. And of course, they make the rest of the fact that, Thoth-Amon and Conan were done. They met many other times, yada, yada, yada. Really wrapping up in a typical Marvel way of, yes, that was the last time we saw Thoth-Amon in this particular Robert E. Howard story, but obviously this is much later in Conan's career, and of course he's meeting Thoth-Amon many other times. Interesting. So there you go. Real observations in this one. I don't understand that Kull wrap-up. I don't understand why that's twisted in there. That to me seems strange. The other thing that I thought was kind of odd in this one was, why did he have to recognize his attackers as they were coming in the room and have dialogue? Why did he have to recognize Ascalante? I don't know that added any value to the story, but clearly Marvel put it in there for a reason. Strange. Oh well, let's get into the Dark Horse one. Alright, let's get into the Dark Horse version. Now, as I mentioned many, many times in this channel, getting your hands on the Dark Horse comics that came out in the 2000s that are actual Conan ones, in good condition without getting hosed on pricing, not so easy. Not so easy. I have my copies of these 4 books in this epic collection, the King Conan Chronicles. This has the Phoenix and the Sword. I think it has the Scarlet Citadel in it. Yeah, it does have the Scarlet Citadel in it as well. And does it have? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about that today. We are here to talk specifically about the Phoenix and the Sword, so let's get into it. Now, I've already turned off the light that was off to the side of the desk, so this should cut down the glare because these are extra shiny pages. And remember, I warned you guys up front, if you got youngins, there's going to be some panels in here. Anyways, the story on this one actually starts off in an interesting way, and Dark Horse has done this quite intentionally, and they've done this before. I believe they did it with was it the Scarlet Citadel they did it with? That's a good question. I think it was the Scarlet Citadel, actually, yes. Scarlet Citadel, I'm just looking at my notes over here. They did this same thing, where the story is basically written by an older King Conan recounting the earlier adventure, which does 2 things. He's recounting it at a later date, so you know he's going to survive, number 1. But number 2, it gives the narrator, in this case Conan, the ability to actually go back in hindsight and add extra information in to fill in the details that are missing. Pretty neat, and I like the way Dark Horse does this. It's a good literary tool in order to draw in the material. So the story starts off with the scribe arriving because he's been summoned. Here's King Conan, and he's, as you see, older Conan, and he's been practicing fencing. And there's some dialogue about drinking terrible things. And they sit under a statue of Ronaldo, and he says, today we're going to be talking about the day that I had to kill this guy. Quite frankly put, not a good day for him. And we go back to the story itself. Obviously, this was a little bit of illusion how he got it. The story starts off with actual dialogue from the conspirators. Unlike what Robert E. Howard did, and unlike what Marvel did, where you have Ascalante and Thoth-Amon after the fact talking about the content of the conversation. In this case, they introduce all the characters at the time. So basically, you're writing it at the point of no longer retrospective, but being current. You have each character introduced. You have a sense of who they are and what their motivation is. And they're doing it through the actual scheming. And this goes back to something very interesting, which is if you actually do some Googling, some tickety-ticketies out there, and you look up Robert E. Howard and you look up By This Axe I Rule and type in Shakespeare, trust me, you'll find something interesting and entertaining if you do. Anyways, they have the chat and the guys leave, and lo and behold, Thoth-Amon does his little muttering about how, they're just leading themselves to their doom. But of course, Ascalante's right there and overhears this time. It's not actually the case where it's him just talking to himself and then going back and talking to Ascalante. He goes back and then he has a chat with him afterwards where he actually unveils his own dreams to take it over. And this is where Thoth-Amon says, this is me, dude, and I'm this crazy wizard. If you didn't put all of your faith in swords, you'd realize that what I'm doing is much more powerful. And Ascalante punches him and they have a whole chat. And this is the whole, pretty much bang on with dialogue of what you saw in the story. Doing well. No real issues here. And this is much more closer to what I would picture a Thoth-Amon. I don't know why. The depiction of that old Marvel comic doesn't I don't know. It doesn't speak to me. That's all we're going to stop right there, okay? Anyways, cutscene to Conan. He's having a conversation with his buddy. He's saying, I wish I could come out and go with you, just like we saw in the Marvel version and just like you saw in the actual Robert E. Howard story, where he's saying, I wish I could go out there and just have a good time. And he's saying, I really hate the fact that I'm stuck here. And then they have the conversation about the map. And he's talking about how, these are places that are mythical to us. And could you tell us more? And it really does draw out. And I like the way they've spread this over a couple pages here. It's a little bit more real estate in the book here than it does in the Marvel version. Really drawing to the experience of Conan that's outside of the realm of what the people of Aquilonia have experienced. Pretty well done. I like that. This was a beautifully done scene, though. This was genius when he's talking about the North. Because guess what we're talking about here? We're talking about the border raids. We are talking about the gods of the North, a.k.a. the Frost Giant's daughter. We're talking about the giants. This was just beautifully thrown in. Such a wonderful throwback to actually give a sense of what's going on in Conan's mind as he's describing these things. Really well done. Anyways, he says, well, piss off. Go have a good time. Just don't, kiss any girls and say it's for Aquilonia because we don't need to start a war. Nobody's laughing here. Again, we've missed the boat. But let's cut scene to where Thoth-Amon and Dion are having a chat. Here's Dion looking like, somebody who's getting pretty spoiled. Doesn't seem to be doing too economically poor to me. And Thoth-Amon's saying, dude, you got to listen to me. I got something to say. So he says, wait a minute, you're a slave. What are you talking about? You can't tell me what to do. By the way, we're in book 2, by the way, right now. And he says, dude, you have no idea who I am. And he walks through who he was. And he touches his brain. It's literally just, I'm going to grab your skull so you can see the history I come from. This is the king of Stygia. This is me casting aside all the other monks. But, unfortunately, and what's beautiful about this, that they've done really well, is they've turned around, they've explained why Thoth-Amon lost his ring. And this is an added detail that Robert E. Howard never did, because you can see him drunk with power here. And he says, because I went through this whole thing, and I was doing this, and I was living high on the hog, Set decided to chastise me for my vanity, and that's what allowed the thief to steal the ring. Neat twist. Very neat twist. I like what they did with that. And it does add a little bit of detail that isn't otherwise in the story that kind of made you wonder, well, yeah, actually, Thoth-Amon, if you were that powerful in the first place, why would a thief have stolen your ring? Seems pretty lame to me. Anyways, he describes being led off and disguising himself with a caravan and Ascalante raiding it and how he actually said, this is who I am. And then he explains, listen, dude, I need you to protect me. Because if this Ascalante guy dies, this is the actual rub of the matter. This is how he's able to be a slave of Ascalante. Ascalante's basically got him trapped. The minute Ascalante dies, apparently a letter that's been left with a hermit somewhere back in Stygia will be opened, and then everybody will learn exactly where Thoth-Amon is, and they'll come for him. And Thoth-Amon is terrified of this because he doesn't have his ring of power to defend himself. Anyways, at this point in time, this is where he actually says, I need you to be the king and protect me. And we'll kill Ascalante, who's planning on killing you. And then eventually, when I get my ring of power, then we find, he's like, a ring? A ring, you say? And this is where, once again, things don't go well for Dion because he wasn't really listening. And lo and behold, he died. Yeah, not the smartest move there, Dion. Anyways, Thoth-Amon picks up the ring. He's got his power and he wanders off. Not really the sense that we had in the story. And this is where we start to see the real departures from the actual Robert E. Howard story. Not that I'm saying they went completely off base, but we start to see departures. Where was the part where he was using Dion's blood? Minor thing. Conan in the Marvel comic didn't do it either, but not here. Anyways, cutscene back to Conan in the dream sequence. Dream sequence. He's being called, he goes, and this is beautifully done. It actually describes how Conan recognizes that he's seen carvings of these nameless elder gods in the past. Very Lovecraftian, very Call of Cthulhu-esque. Really enjoyed that. Anyways, he gets to the actual temple, and this is an interesting point. If you look real closely right here, I believe this is supposed to be a carving of the head of Set facing sideways. And if you look, I believe that's what you're seeing here, which is them doing the literal use of the language that was used by Robert E. Howard. Very cool. Anyways, he gets up into here, and who does he run into? He runs into Epimetheus, who again explains who he is, and on to the next book. Again, we cut back to Conan continuing the tale. And he basically, a little bit of background in this, which is kind of important and why this is interluded, is the fact that the scribe says, how do you know about this? And he's like, dude, I've read all sorts of things. I'm not stupid. Back to the story. Anyway, Epimetheus says, I'm here to protect you, and I have to make sure that you stay safe because Apollonian stays safe. And by the way, I fought Set for ages, and this is what I do. And the last time he was here, I fought him back. But there's somebody out there right now that's working against you. It's this bad. Look at the imagery. Look at the Call of Cthulhu-esque imagery up here. Just beautiful. Anyways, and this is actually a picture of him fighting Set in the past. Awesome. That is so much detail. Anyway, still just trying to make Conan understand that something beyond just swords is happening here. And then, boom, he throws the marking on the sword and wanders off. Conan wakes up, looks, there's the marking on the sword, but look at the eyes. What the? Ooh, I'm going to murder somebody. That's what I read when I see these, by the way. This is the what the set of eyes. What the? And this one down here is, ooh, people are going to die. Yeah, pretty cool. And the bad guys are breaking in. And kaboom, they're into the room. Death to the tyrant. And you see him. Why isn't he wearing armor? Why are we doing the same thing Marvel did here where you didn't put the armor on him? The only reason they were able to wound him in the first place is because he was covered here, but he was uncovered in his flanks because he hadn't tied them on. Why would he put on wrist guards and a belt? Anyways, the whole debacle in the room is about to go down. The schlemazel of the assassination is about to occur. Let's get back to Thoth-Amon, who's now decided to kill somebody else and have a ritual elsewhere with hooks hanging on the roof. Where did he find a room with hooks on? I don't know. Anyway, he ends up calling in some sort of monster, and he does put blood on the ring. But wrong person's blood. That's a moot point. And lo and behold, baboon. Again, no wings. I don't understand. Why can't we just follow instructions? Baboon, no wings. Anyways, here's the sandal. Go kill him and everybody with him. And you are aware that Conan is in a battle at this point in time. And he is. He's legitimately in quite the battle. And they charge him. And legitimately, what they do here, to their credit, is they don't have Conan recognize everybody as they're coming in and have a conversation. He's killing people legitimately following what Robert E. Howard in the story. And you know what? His sword breaks and he has to grab the axe off the wall. It's been there for half a century. And he gets in there for the fighting and he's cleaving. And he's having a good time. He's doing everything you want to do. Basically, you should be careful what you wish for because you wanted some action. Well, you got action now. It's probably just not the action you wanted. The whole battle ensues. He's trying to tell Ronaldo, don't attack me. This is not going to go well for you. And he decides to attack him and stab him in the side anyways. And he has to brain him. And that's the death of Ronaldo that we saw the statue of at the beginning of the story. All that's left at this point in time is a couple guys in Escalante. And they get ready for the fight. Who wants to die first? Great line. Thoth-Amon, once again, seen incanting, and bam. It's almost like he teleports in here, which is kind of cool. I like that idea. It wasn't the story, but that, like it just appearing right there like that, thumbs up, Dark Horse. That just added some strength to the story. And look at this thing. Just look at it. Santa Maria. I gotta tell you, if that was coming for me, I would not be in a happy place. It goes in, and I guess at this point in time, what you're supposed to assume right off the bat is it murdered all these guys before it got to the door. At which point in time it got to the door, sees Escalante, calls him out, and then strips his head off. Where's with the eyes and the, anyways, Conan sees it. He's the last guy standing, and he throws the blade. It glances off its head. It bites his arm. Very good. Conan reaches over, grabs the sword, stabs him, and stabs him again.
Do you see the energy here, though? You see the magic that's happening here? I don't really see it in the second one because it's happening behind the baboon, but you see what he's doing, and you see that this thing does have impact. And then it starts to melt. And this is when everybody shows up, and basically the same conversation happens that you saw earlier, where he's saying, look, you can't tell me I'm crazy. There's totally a monster over there. And this one, they cut scene, though, as soon as they recognize the phoenix and the sword. They don't go over and see the stain on the floor. But again, I guess you're supposed to infer from this that at that point in time, everybody was cool with what Conan's doing and the fact that he's legitimately the king. And then you have the whole thing end over here. This is an interesting twist, though. Conan is very clear in this dialogue where he says, oh yeah, Thoth-Amon wasn't done. He went back down to Stygia to basically re-seize his power, to re-put himself on his seat of power. And no, we were totally not done with that guy. And we're going to see him again later. And lo and behold, the very bench that they've been sitting on, out from behind it comes a viper. Very Thoth-Amon-y. Very cool. Interesting way they wrap things up in here. Some of the key deviation we saw in here, though, I don't understand. Well, no, I do understand. They wanted to draw Thoth-Amon into more of what we call the Marvel, or the modern Thoth-Amon that we know. So obviously you're going to add more to it. The fact they had to go off and have a separate ritual to draw this monster out, not quite getting. Why we're not really getting a sense of this ape? I'm not understanding why everybody seems to be missing this. Other thing that came out on this one that was kind of odd was the fact that this is all being done retrospectively. It's great in that it's a great literary tool, but it does deviate from what was actually written in the original Robert E. Howard story. And the last thing, which really threw me off, is why are we not seeing the beast's eyes doing the soul-searing thing? It really sort of diminishes the real threat that this outer planar creature has. This is more of just that I'm a baboon and I'm going to kill you. It's not this outer planar monster that has the ability to fly in, be missed, literally steal your soul. I don't see it stealing Conan's soul here. I don't see the battle in his mind before he stabs it. Why does he have to stab it twice? Are we diminishing the power that was with that phoenix on the sword thing? Shouldn't one have done it? I don't know. Great adaptation, don't get me wrong. I like what you did here, especially with that whole thing where Thoth-Amon got lazy. But, no, interesting. Let's get to the wrap-up.
Let's wrap this bad boy up, shall we? So let's do the compare and contrast part now, though. As you guys know, we do this in one take. There ain't no multiple takes on this conclusion part. So let's think about these now. Okay. Conan the Barbarian, Annual number 2. What do we think of this? Well, it was very close to the Robert E. Howard version. Here's where the deviation got a little weird for me. I don't understand this whole thing where he knew who all of his attackers were as they were coming in the room. That seems odd. And you know what? It could be a narrative tool where you're just trying to name and label for the reader. This is who this is. This is who this is. We got to understand, you're reading a comic book. You've got a lot of people in this. A lot of faces are being depicted. Armor is being depicted you might not recognize. Maybe that's why. It's a simplicity thing. This is why we've got to label these guys for the reader. I don't know. I don't know. Why did Conan have to know who Escalante is? In the Robert E. Howard story, it was only when everybody came in the room and looked at just basically the massacred bodies all over the floor, they said, well, that's Escalante. Yeah, I know that guy. Conan didn't. I don't understand why that was there. The other thing that was kind of weird in that one was really the whole Kull mess. Now, there's an editorial write-up at the end of the story, and I didn't go into that here, where Marvel is trying to reconcile the fact that this is a Kull story, but it's also a Conan story. And they said, yes, it's a Kull story and a Conan story. Are you confused yet? Yeah. And they were trying to, I think, do the wrap-up there where they were including that Kull image behind Conan when he was basically like, a wolf at bay against the wall. You had that there for that reason. They were trying to say, no, this is history repeating itself. This is because basically both of these stories are Robert E. Howard canon, right? They're stories he wrote. They're published stories at this point in time. You can't say they didn't happen. Robert E. Howard wrote them. So it's difficult to reconcile this whole thing is happening the exact same way. Ronaldo being the name of the bard in both the story. I think Grommel, was that a name that was the same in Vanna? I can't even remember the names anymore because they've blurred and I'm an old man. Those were weird though. That was an odd thing for me. And I really don't get it. I don't get that. I don't think to me as the reader that really explains a lot. But that could be an issue where, quite frankly, I've read too many Conan comics, and that's why I think it's unnecessary. Maybe to a reader that's not that familiar with the Kull comics, which I've read them all, maybe you're not going to really be that familiar with it. And you need that there. I don't know. Literary choice they made at the time. Let's talk about the Dark Horse one now. Okay, Dark Horse. What do we got on this one? Well, Thoth-Amon definitely looks more Thoth-Amon-y. I'm going to give you that. This to me looks like what a Thoth-Amon is. Maybe it's just because of what I grew up reading, but that seems more Thoth-Amon-y to me. All right, so we're going to go with that. 2, why did he have to sacrifice somebody else? Dion's body, dude's body is sitting right there. You literally just sporked him, all right? He's done. He's right. You need blood, it's right there. Waste not, want not. I don't get why he had to go off and find himself somewhere else that had hooks hanging from the roof, which quite frankly looked really very close to one of the scenes that would have predicted with Zoltutin in Zultautan, the wizard guy that was in the Hour of the Dragon. Because remember, Dark Horse depicted every place where he was slaughtering people to have hooks hanging from the ceiling. I think it's a Dark Horse thing. So that I don't get that. Why is the extraplanar creature just a baboon? Granted, it looks like it teleported in, which is really, really cool. Like a teleporting baboon would be absolutely freaking horrifying. But why is it just a baboon? Why am I not seeing the eye-searing, soul-stealing monstrosity that was really what Robert E. Howard was going for? This was an extraplanar creature. When it flew out of the garden in the story, one of the guards was losing his poop because he saw this flying ape going overhead that was so horrifying. He probably had a nervous breakdown, PTSD for the rest of his life. We're talking about something here that was material, and it seems to have been downplayed in this Dark Horse version. And I don't get that. What I really like in the Dark Horse version is that wonderful art and the depiction behind the whole dream sequence and the battle and the background of Set. And they didn't take any liberties with that. That's pretty much what Robert E. Howard was going for. But the imagery that they've chosen to throw with it, wow. And throwing in that little nugget, which was not Robert E. Howard at all, of, well, no, he lost his ring because he was living a little too extravagantly. Let's just use that language here, shall we? Yeah. That was pretty cool. All right, conclusion time. Which one of these is closer? Yeesh. Well, they both kind of screwed this up in minor levels, not materially. I think both of them followed the story. I think both of them got where they needed to get to. Which one of these is closer to the Robert E. Howard story? Well, Here's the thing. Here's where I'm going to draw this in here, okay? I believe Dark Horse added to the story when they threw in the whole thing about how Thoth-Amon lost his ring. Fine. I think they went away from the story when Thoth-Amon had to go do a separate ritual, number 1. And number 2, suddenly the extraplanar creature was just a baboon. I'm not really getting that. But the Marvel version of the story really lost me with the Kull thing at the end. And with him recognizing all of his attackers. The point of this was that these attackers were very much unknown to him when they were trying to kill him. It was driving home the point that King Conan needed to be prepared for attacks from anywhere, because these are people that are just his people. They're the Aquilonians, or the people he's kinging over are the ones who want to kill him. And that really speaks to it in the story. It's the fact that it's the unknown, that he can't sleep at night, that he should be afraid of, what did he call it? Poison in his goblets. And he's got to be weary of this stuff. And to me, the fact that he recognized these guys as it was going on during the attack really sort of diminished a little bit from that. And it lost a little bit of power for me in there. The other thing that it kind of lost was really in that sense of, well, why are we doing this wrap up with Kull? And I know I'm harping on this point, but to me, that's the one where we went too far on this one. And to me, that's the one where I'd have to say, if I was saying which one's closer, although Dark Horse did have its liberties, and I generally want to give something, I'm leaning towards wanting to give something to Marvel on this annual here. No, I'm giving it to Dark Horse. For me, Dark Horse is the better of the two when you're looking at what's closer to Robert E. Howard. Sure, it had its little deviations. Granted, they both had their little deviations, okay? It didn't do anything material in those deviations, though, other than lowering the threat level of this extraplanar creature. To me, that is not as egregious as the Kull bleh at the end of the Marvel one. No, there you go. So we're giving it a Dark Horse. Cool. Let's wrap this bad boy up. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. Well, there it is, everybody. That was Robert E. Howard Battle Royale number 18. It's done. Wow. And I tell you, it's so strange to me that I almost missed this story completely when I was mapping out all of the ones that I had to do in these Battle Royales. That's just odd. Really a surprise for me at this one. Honestly, it was. When I got to the end and I got to the conclusion on this one, I was so leaning towards, and I think I was leaning towards going the Marvel route, but it's only when I spoke through which one did which that I realized, no, actually, I think Dark Horse did it better. This is why I never know. I never know until I get to the end and actually do the comparison and the conclusion, because that's the one take, because I just want to make sure it's authentic. So odd, eh? Huh. Anyways, that's this one, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next video. All right, it is post-credit scene time. It is Easter egg time. I don't care what you want to call this part of these videos. It's time for that. We haven't been throwing these in all the time, but for those of you who are new to the channel, every once in a while I'll sink one of these in at the end. Some of you have been saying to me, Tennessee Fats, would you mind sharing some of the content that's in the Tennessee Fats library and telling us what these books are? We're sure you have some solid gold in there. Well, I wouldn't say everything's solid gold. It's solid gold to me. Let's go with that. I would love to do that for you guys. And I thought this time we'd go with the first entry on that one. And I thought what we do on this one is actually one of the books I've been dying to talk about for quite some time that somebody specifically asked me about. You know who you are. Let me grab it. Let me grab it. Hold on. Now, I'm going to start off by saying right now, I am not being paid by this guy. I am getting no recognition whatsoever for doing this. I am just sharing this with you because this book means a lot to me. And it's this. 300 Comics About Frogs. Somebody asked me this at Tennessee Fats. What the hell is 300 Comics About Frogs? Well, get yourself on the interwebs. You know, that. Get yourself on there and do some tickety-tickety. Search up Greg Hyland. Take a look at that. Now, he is, in my opinion, a Canadian treasure. He's a Canadian comic book artist and writer that has been doing comedy comics for quite some time. I know nobody likes to have themselves dated or aged, and we're not going to do that here. And we're not doing age shaming. You just stop that. Stop it right now. We are going to talk about the fact that this guy has some quality experience under his belt doing lethargic comics, then went on to do lethargic comics online, and has since moved into doing these frog comics. And the Frog comics are semi-autobiographical comics. And what Greg has decided to do is make one comic a day. He publishes them online. And you can support them by Patreon, I believe. And what he does is each one of these will be a semi-autobiographical spoof. It's either something that happened to him, it's something that he's thinking about. Some of them are completely not real. So like, for example, the Frog calls Justin Trudeau on a regular basis and has chats with him. Sting constantly calls the Frog and pisses him off. And daybats. They are a thing. Anyways, all of these things are written within here. Some real, some not. But it's the quality comedy in it that really made me appreciate this. Because I've been reading lethargic comics for years and years and years. And I love the comedy in those. So when I saw this, I went out and picked it up. This book means a lot to me, actually. And I'll tell you, and honestly, it's come back, it's meant a lot more to me in this last month. When you reach our age, everybody, and I know I'm aging me, you don't have to include yourself in my age group. You reach a point in time when life starts taking things away instead of giving you things. And you get a bad news day. And I had one of those bad news days about 3 weeks ago now. Yeah. And I went to bed that night. You know what bad news days are. You know what they are. Listen, these are the days where it's a real kick in the balls and you go to bed that night not feeling good. And I got to tell you, this was not a good one for me and I needed a laugh. And thank God I owned this because I said to myself, I need something to cheer me up here because this is not going well. I grabbed this and I was laughing so hard I was crying within about 5 minutes. This is comedy gold. It is pure Canadiana. It is written from such a dry, sarcastic sense of humor point of view. It just, you cannot help but read this and you know exactly where this is coming from. So that's what this book is. Each book is one strip that's taken off of the webcomic. Greg, if you're watching this, by all means, give me another one of these. I would love a second 300 comics about frogs, and I'm sure you're probably getting up there and you're ready to do it now or sometime soon. I would very gladly buy it from you. This is just genius, and I thank you for putting it out. Everybody, that's one piece of the Tennessee Fats library that I've shared with you. I think the next one we'll do, I think we might do something Greek.